A student asks his teacher a question. When I hear that something is right, should I go and do it immediately? The teacher says, no. He says, there are your father and elder brothers to be consulted. Go and ask them first. A few lines later, a second student asks the teacher the same question. Word for word the same question. And the teacher says, immediately carry into practice what you hear. Now there is a third student standing in the room, and he does something I find genuinely remarkable for a 2,500-year-old book. He puts his hand up and says he is confused. He repeats both answers back. One man was told to consult his family, the other was told to act at once. And he says plainly that he does not understand. And the teacher explains. One of those students hangs back, so he was pushed forward. The other one has more energy than he knows what to do with, so he was held back. Same question. Opposite answers. Both correct. The book is the Analects of Confucius. It is about 29,000 words in the translation I am reading, and in English it has one dominant use. It is a quarry for quotations. Today, in 20 minutes, I'm reading it in James Legge's translation of the 1890s. And what I want to show you is why the quotation is the wrong unit. The same question gets opposite answers depending on who is asking, which means every line in this book has a missing half. The person it was said to.
I counted the phrase. The master said.
It appears 375 times. That number is the whole problem in miniature, because it looks like a book of 375 detachable sayings, and that is exactly how it has been used. Search for Confucius quotes in English, and you will find a torrent of them. I took the 6 most circulated ones and searched this translation for each. Choose a job you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life. Not in the book. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. Not in the book. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. Not in the book. Our greatest glory is not in never falling. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, adjust the action steps. None of them. 0 hits, all 6. But I am not going to spend this episode on fake quotations, because the more interesting failure is what happens to the real ones. The real sayings are not freestanding. They were said to named people, in rooms, in answer to something. Take one out and you have not extracted a principle. You have deleted the variable that determined the answer. 375 sayings is, conveniently, slightly more than a calendar year, and that is roughly what has been done with them. How many pieces of advice have you ever given that would survive being repeated to a stranger? Watch him do it again with a bigger subject. Someone asks him what filial piety is, and he gives 5 words. It is not being disobedient. That is the whole answer. And it sounds, on its own, like a fairly grim little maxim about obedience. But then a student is driving his carriage afterwards, and the teacher brings it up unprompted. He says, I was asked what filial piety was, and I answered, not being disobedient. The student asks what he meant by that, and the explanation turns out to be nothing about obedience at all. It is about ceremony. That parents while alive should be served according to propriety, and when dead should be buried and sacrificed too according to propriety. So the 5-word answer was a compressed file, and the man it was given to was expected to unpack it. The student in the carriage could not, so he asked, and got the long version. Notice the shape of that. The short answer was not the real answer. It was the answer sized for its listener, and the person who admitted he did not follow it got more, not less. There is a whole theory of teaching in that small scene, and it is the opposite of the one this book is usually used to support. It is not, here are the rules, apply them. It is, here is what you specifically need to hear today, and if it does not fit, say so. The students are not interchangeable, and the book keeps telling you so. There is a short passage that is almost a group photograph. 4 of them are standing near him, and each one is described in a few words. One is looking bland and precise. Another, the impulsive one, the soldier, is looking bold and soldierly. 2 more are free and straightforward in manner, and then the line. The master was pleased. He is looking at 4 people who are nothing like each other and enjoying it. Count how often they appear, and you can see the shape of the room. The bold one turns up 50 times. The clever one, who was a merchant and a talker, also 50. The ambitious one, 23. And the quiet one, the favorite, only 15, which turns out to matter enormously, and I will come back to it. Those are not the proportions of a rule book. They are the proportions of a classroom, and specifically a classroom where one student takes up a lot of air and another one barely speaks. Anyone who is taught anything will recognize the distribution. And he watched them. There is a passage where he lists what to look at in a person, what they do, what their motives are, where they feel at ease, and then asks twice over, how can a man conceal his character? He is not being rhetorical. That is a working method, and he is using it on the 4 men standing in front of him. There is another line I think belongs here, 7 words long in this translation. The accomplished scholar is not a utensil. A utensil does one job. A person is not supposed to. And you cannot train somebody out of being a utensil by handing everybody in the room the same instruction. So when you read a line from this book, the first question is not, what does it mean? It is, which of these people was he looking at? Now, let me argue against myself for a moment, because some of these lines really are portable. There is one about knowledge that I think survives any amount of extraction. When you know a thing, to hold that you know it, and when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. And Legge closes it. This is knowledge. That is not advice for one particular student. That is a definition, and a hard one, because it makes knowledge a matter of accurate bookkeeping about your own ignorance rather than a quantity of facts. And there is the famous one, the rule that turns up in some form in almost every tradition. In this book, it is stated as a negative, not to do to others as you would not wish done to yourself. I want to point at that negative because it is doing real work. The positive version, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, licenses you to act on other people according to your own preferences. The negative version only ever restrains you. It never tells you to go and do anything. Which of those two would you rather be on the receiving end of from someone whose taste is nothing like yours? And it does not say it once. It comes back later in a second formulation, and that one is negative as well. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Twice, and both times as a restraint. That is somebody making a choice. There is a third line I would defend anywhere, and it is the closest this book comes to a statement of method. Learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. 2 failure modes, named and balanced against each other. Reading without thinking wastes the reading. Thinking without reading is dangerous because there is nothing to check yourself against. I have met both of those people. I have been both of those people in the same week. So the book is not incapable of generality. It is just that generality is the exception here, and the exception has been mistaken for the method.
Here is where I get off.
A system in which the answer depends on who is asking requires the teacher to be right about people. And that is an enormous amount of trust to place in one man's judgment. When it works, you get the scene I opened with. 2 students, 2 answers, both calibrated. When it does not, you get a hierarchy in which the person at the top is unfalsifiable because any inconsistency can be explained as calibration. And this book was used, for a very long time, by people who were extremely interested in that second outcome. The propriety this text keeps returning to hardened over centuries into an examination system and a set of obligations that ran in one direction, down. I do not think that is the book's fault in any simple way, but I also do not think the book is innocent of it, because the raw material is right there, the ranking, the deference, the assumption that the older man is the one who knows. What I can say for it is that the version we have keeps letting the students interrupt. The confused one asks. The grieving disciples tell the master he is overdoing it. And there is one more thing I want to put on the credit side. There is a passage about walking along a road with two other people, in which he says that both of them can serve him as teachers, that he will select their good qualities and follow them, and their bad qualities and avoid them. Two people, any two, whoever happens to be on the road, not sages, not officials. A hierarchy in which the man at the top is still taking instruction from whoever he is walking next to is at least an unusual hierarchy. A book that had been fully weaponized for obedience would have cut those lines out, and this one keeps them in. A student asks him about serving the spirits of the dead. It is a perfectly normal question in his world, and probably the single most common thing a wise old man got asked. He refuses it, in the form of a question. While you are not able to serve men, how can you serve their spirits? The student, undeterred, pushes. Then may I ask about death? And he gets, while you do not know life, how can you know about death? I find this one of the most attractive moments in the book, and also one of the most evasive, and I think it is both at once. He is not saying there is nothing after death. He is not saying there is. He is saying that the question is out of order, that you do not get to ask about the harder thing while the easier thing is still unfinished in front of you. That is either profound humility or a very elegant way of changing the subject. And after several readings, I genuinely cannot tell which. And this is not a one-off. There is a short passage that is nothing but a list of what he would not discuss. The subjects on which the master did not talk were extraordinary things, feats of strength, disorder, and spiritual beings. Somebody sat down and wrote out the negative space. 4 categories he steered away from, recorded as carefully as anything he actually said. I cannot think of another ancient book that keeps that list. Most of them are extremely keen to tell you about extraordinary things and spiritual beings. That is usually the selling point. This one writes down the questions its teacher would not take. What I notice is that both answers have the same structure as everything else here. They are not statements about the universe. They are statements about what this person, standing here, should be working on next. He describes himself once, briefly, and the description is strange for someone who ended up with a school named after him. A transmitter, and not a maker, believing in and loving the ancients. He is claiming to have invented nothing. Everything he teaches, he says, he is passing along from a past that was better ordered than his present, and his entire contribution is fidelity in the handing over. Now, that is not true. The compression, the calibration, the refusal to answer questions in the order they were asked, those are not transmission. They are a method, and they are his. But I think the self-description tells you what he thought he was doing, and it explains why the book has no system in it. He is not building a philosophy. He is trying to make a small number of specific young men competent to hold office without becoming monsters, using whatever from the past will fit into each of them. Is that a philosophy at all? I would say no, and that this is the reason it has survived being quoted badly for 2,500 years. He doubles down on it elsewhere. I am not one who was born in the possession of knowledge. I am one who is fond of antiquity and earnest in seeking it there. And then there is the passage most people know the shape of even if they have never read it, the one where he lays out his own life in decades. At 15, I had my mind bent on learning. At 30, he stood firm. At 40, he had no doubts. And at the end of it, at 70, I could follow what my heart desired without transgressing what was right. That is a man describing 55 years of work whose entire result is that he finally wants the right things without having to be told. Not that he knows more rules, that the rules have stopped being necessary, which, taken seriously, means the whole apparatus of propriety was scaffolding, and scaffolding is meant to come down. There is no doctrine to falsify. There is only a record of a man paying attention. In that same group photograph passage, the 4 students standing round him, each described in a phrase, there is a line that stopped me cold. He looks at the bold one, the soldier, the student who appears more often than almost anyone else in this book, and he says, out loud, in front of everybody, you, there, he will not die a natural death. He is telling a young man to his face that his character will get him killed. And he was right. That student went on to serve in another state and died in a coup, cut down while refusing to leave a post he had taken on. I want to sit with how uncomfortable that line is. It is not a prophecy in any mystical sense. It is a teacher who has watched somebody closely enough to see the shape of their end in the shape of their temperament, and who says it to them rather than about them. He is not guessing either. This is the student who appears 50 times in a book of about 29,000 words, the one who is always first to speak, always volunteering, always the one told to slow down. The teacher has had 2 decades of evidence. Would you want to be told? And would it have helped? Because the record suggests it did not. He went anyway, and the thing that killed him is the same thing that made him worth teaching. And if a teacher can see that much, what exactly was he doing for the other 50 appearances? Pushing this man forward or trying to slow him down? The quiet one, the favorite, 15 appearances, which is fewer than almost anybody because he asks very few questions. There is a line elsewhere about how he never disagreed, which the master initially mistook for stupidity. There is a line about him that is one of the strangest compliments ever paid to a student. "He gives me no assistance. There is nothing that I say in which he does not delight." Read that twice. His favorite student is described as being of no help, precisely because he never pushes back. In a book whose whole method is calibration, the one man who never gives you a reading is the one man you cannot calibrate to. And he is the favorite anyway. He dies young, and the man who spent this entire book calibrating his answers, weighing what each person could carry, refusing to be drawn on death, comes apart. "Alas, heaven is destroying me. Heaven is destroying me." He says it twice. Legge keeps the repetition, and the repetition is the whole thing. Then, in the next chapter, he mourns so violently that the disciples standing round him intervene. They say to his face, "Master, your grief is excessive?" And he answers that if he is not to mourn bitterly for this man, then for whom should he mourn? Every serene line you have ever seen attributed to this man was written down by people who also wrote this down. They kept the scene where he loses control. They kept the students telling him he was overdoing it. They kept his answer, which is not wise and not measured and is simply the truth. That is not the behavior of a school protecting the image of its founder. It is the behavior of people who were in the room. So, 375 times the master said something, and every time he said it to somebody. There is a moment near the middle of the book where he is standing by a stream, watching the water go past, and says, "It passes on just like this, not ceasing day or night." 9 words, an exclamation mark, and no addressee at all. It is the one line in the whole collection that appears to be addressed to nobody at all. Just a man looking at a river and saying what he sees. And even that one has a listener, because somebody was standing close enough to write it down. That is what this book actually is. Not a doctrine, not a rule book, not 375 interchangeable maxims for a calendar. It is the record kept by a group of people of what one man said to each of them, including the parts where he contradicted himself on purpose, the part where he told one of them how he would die, and the part where he could not stop crying. So the next time you meet one of these lines on its own, with the name stripped off and a serif font underneath it, ask the question the book itself keeps asking: who was he talking to? Because he was talking to somebody, and whoever it was, it probably was not you.